everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I'm excited to be back in the office for a few days this week and to bring to you my friend Amy March, this beautiful woman right here from Austin, Texas. She is the executive chef and co-founder of the Steeping Room and the Urban Tea House in Austin, Texas. She has over 2 decades of experience in specialty tea and culinary arts and holistic. And today we are going to talk about serving tea with an intention and how we can bring tea into our events in a more holistic way versus just those tea bags. So hello, Amy.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on today, Tracy. I really appreciate it. I'm doing pretty well here in Austin, Texas. We're having quite the spring. We didn't have much rain for a while, and then we got a ton, and the pollen is popping. So I apologize to everybody listening that I'm going to sound a little muted and make cough here or there, but I'm just fine, just battling the Austin allergies.
Well, thank you for doing that. And I'm coming to Austin tomorrow. So thank you for the warning.
Been warned.
Yes, exactly. And we've got a couple of people on Instagram already, Jacqueline Bernstein and Bidu Ramanat and the allergy aspect. So thank you for joining us on Instagram. If you have any comments or questions for Amy or I, please put them in the chat on Instagram and I will share them to our screen. So, all right. You've spent 2 decades immersed in the world of tea, and what prompted that, and to tea as both this culinary and a community building element?
Well, number one is that I grew up on the East Coast, and there's a lot of, I'm so sorry, I did not get rid of that ringer. We did not talk about that one part. So I grew up on the East Coast and there's just a lot more tea drinking there than Austin. I came here to Austin in my mid-30s and I was just taking a little break, and I immediately noticed sort of what was missing culturally for me was tea, but that there was a real interest in it. There were people drinking it. There were people who were interested in if there were places to purchase it. And I first came from a more holistic health background. I had a massage and health and nutrition program or business in New York City and also taught there. And I studied both Chinese herbs and Chinese teas for over the course of about 8 years. So when I got here, I saw the lack of this in the culture and was thinking maybe I was going to restart my business here from the holistic health practice standpoint. But as I started to develop that practice with a tea component in it, really my other love and passion and background within food and natural foods came to the forefront, and the real wish to have that here in the Austin community. So my partner who helped form the business and I really set in for a 3-year planning of taking tea and a balanced natural menu that was scratch made, and came up with the concept of the Steeping Room. In that time, we were traveling and immersing ourselves more within tea culture, but also tea education within sommelier style trainings, so that we would both really be on board. And then we started tasting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teas to launch our business. And the goal really was to create for me, and is community through food and through tea, and that tea really provides and creates the table, the palette for community building, for connection, for communication. And we'll get into a little bit later some of the chemical properties a little bit, maybe, because I love to always mention that help to support that. But that allowed me to create a new community for myself with a perfect pair, which was tea, Camellia sinensis. There are also herbal teas, which are come along for the ride, but we are focused primarily on true tea plants.
Okay, so something in there, you said hundreds and hundreds of types of teas. And so I'm thinking the grocery store, and there's probably maybe 100 in there, but they're all like mixtures and almost the same and with a different brand name on them.
Yes.
So those are different than what you're doing. You're steeping them like with leaves and everything versus the tea bag. Is that correct?
Correct. So because we were really committed to this plant from a culinary perspective. For us, that means steeping whole leaf and seeking and sourcing whole leaf plants from farms, from distributors, and working with both that plant as a beverage, but also as an ingredient. We were able to really appreciate and learn about the flavor profiles and the pairings and what the growing regions, all of that, how that influences it. So when you say hundreds and hundreds, we say hundreds and hundreds of unflavored teas, which somebody will, doesn't it all taste the same? And it doesn't, just like a wine doesn't. A wine is influenced by the terroir, by the seasonality, when it's picked, all of those things. And that's very important to tea. It's the timing. We think like, you just harvested. I went out and picked some lettuce. No, the timing is extremely important to teas, to when they're harvested, how long they are withered, and then the processes that happen to them after completely can take this plant that is the same plant, but many different varietals of it, and turn it into black tea, green tea, oolong, pour, yellow tea, white tea. All of those things have a lot to do with how it's been handled and also where it's been grown. So yeah, we had a lot. I thought that I was a tea drinker, and I was, and I drank loose leaf teas. I'd lived in London. I traveled in India and Nepal. I'd been exposed to all sorts of things that weren't tea bags, but I had a lot to get under my feet to be a tea professional. But it's not a barrier to entry. There's so much good tea. You don't have to have that level of knowledge to know what you enjoy. And that's also not to say that there isn't possibility within the tea bag. There are. Right. And I think that one of the things we're going to get to today a little bit is about the place of the tea bag and how it relates to conferences and event planning. There still is a place for a tea bag, but it's really like a tiny little window. It's a tiny window.
Well, and
you say you hate tea and you only had a tea bag. I mean, talk to me.
Well, and I'm going to say I don't hate tea, but it depends on the flavor, because some of them are very, very dry to me. And I'm like, okay, makes my mouth dry. And I'm like, I don't like it. I don't want to drink that. So I need to come and spend some time with you in Austin to figure out, like, the Julia Roberts, like, what kind of eggs do you like from the Runaway Bride movie? Like, is it scrambled or fried or whatever, but figuring out that tea. So
right.
I like steeping fresh ginger with some lemon juice and hot water and honey. I love that. But I know
that's
more
great for digestion. That's great for.
Oh, really? Okay.
For this, I could be drinking that right now with the honey and the lemon. But yeah, I think a lot of reasons why people haven't maybe found their tea, if they're open to flavors that might be more delicate, because yes, tea in general is more delicate than coffee, though there are some really strong teas as well. And so some people are like, it's just water. But someone could argue to you that what you're drinking, that's just water, a little spicy. So it would have a lot to do quite possibly with the temperature of water that your tea's been, steeped out, what type of tea you've had, how long it's been steeped. And there are teas that really are meant to be a little more drying, a little more astringent. They're meant for pairing with certain foods, or they're meant to have the additional addition of milk. There are different, there's Camellia sinensis, Camellia sinensis assamica, Camellia, that goes on in the different varieties, and they have different components to them that give you a different experience on the palate. And so we approached tea when we started the steeping room like wine. And I think that, and we had to spend a lot of time sort of saying it's like wine. And we don't really talk about it in that way anymore. But if we go back to a food and beverage side of things, and you talk about like what space has been given to all of these other beverages, tea deserves a place at that table. Tea is the second most consumed beverage in the world after water.
Really?
Yeah,
so
internationally.
Above beer, above coffee.
Internationally, tea is the second most consumed beverage in the world. And we don't think about it as much because it really does maybe slip into little habits along the way. And I would say that it's a gentle companion in many ways. And so we can often maybe ignore our gentle friends, but it's a powerhouse.
Wow.
It's a powerhouse in its presence, and it's a powerhouse in its chemical structure, and it's a powerhouse in its potential. And this isn't to naysay coffee. I'm not here to be like, oh, boo to coffee, but coffee has a different purpose. But I do think like within gatherings and meetings, sometimes we're embracing the alcohol and the coffee as much as the chemicals that they are, but they have a social component, and we're leaving out a group of people through just even the social component of tea, which we could talk about more, which I think is a really important consideration within meeting planning. I think that we're missing the boat somewhere.
Well, that's so intriguing and I've got this list of questions to ask you, but now I'm going to go in some tangents maybe, but I also want to say hello to Wendy.
For it.
And Hillary Tolle Carter on Instagram. And then Jen just said Vince should watch the show. So thank you very much. Hello, Jen. She's all about non-alcoholic cocktail.
Awesome.
Well, so
awesome. Which is fantastic. Within non-alcoholic bar programs, and has also picked up a popularity within alcohol bar programs. And I can speak to a little bit to both of those as well.
Okay. So so the first question is tea plays a different role in events. I mean, and I'm going to tie this to this other question that I had prefaced with you with, is that a lot of times in hotels and convention centers, we're negotiating a per gallon price of coffee, and it's upwards of $100 to $200 a gallon. And that's for a gallon of water for the tea. And so a lot of planners have actually cut the tea from their programs, so they're not paying for that water. But what opportunities does tea provide that coffee doesn't potentially?
Well, I just want to first just approach that number, which I think that $150 to $200 number by the venue is insane and highway robbery. But that's the playing field. But the idea that then you would exclude, so that's the bar. That's the bar that's been set. So why is coffee why is it okay to spend that on the coffee? I mean, I know everybody wants to drink it, but why isn't it okay to spend it on a gallon or two of tea? Because who cares if it's $150 or $200? I don't care. You've left me out of the room. And I'm now speaking not as a tea professional. I'm speaking as somebody at a conference. I was at a conference very recently, and we would have breaks. And at those breaks were bottles of water and coffee, really great coffee, nice coffee. They had it catered in. We weren't in a venue where there would even be that venue fee. So maybe they're paying $30 to $50 for a gallon of those coffees. And could those cafes have provided hot water? Or in the instance of when you were dealing with my cafe, I could have provided you with that coffee, and I would have steeped the tea for you, and you would have had it in the exact same containers. And when you're dealing with cafe programs, they are capable. That's part of what I do, is wholesale to restaurants, bars, cafes, and helping them not only on their day-to-day individual sales, but also on their catering offerings. But if we go back to the idea of the hotel and this bar, but we were at this conference, and we would have these breaks, and I want to feel included. I don't know a lot of people there. I know some people. Maybe I want to also be able to join in this team building, networking experience, but you've just shoved me out. Now, I did bring my fellow canister, thermos, and I brought tea bags, because in this setting, a tea bag or a pour ball or some sort of solid tea, but I brought, in case we got a lot of samples, I brought some tea bags. I ripped the paper off, I put it in there, and I trotted away from my social experience I could have to find the hot water. So I found the hot water. I heard another person was looking for hot water. I find her, we go get our hot water, we come back, but we've missed a good part of that. And so I don't care that it's $150. That is my point, is that I don't have a solution, except that we should be working with these venues to challenge what the food overall beverage buy-in is, and what that number is, and how much alcohol they want you to purchase, how much and if it's hot water and some tea bags, advocate that they're good tea bags. There are better tea bags. Let's have some good tea bags with some variety, but let's bring the hot water.
Right. Yeah. And or let's negotiate that gallon of water down to, less than what you're paying for the coffee. But,
Absolutely.
and some hotel person said it was because Amy goes up and steals all the honey and the tea bags and takes them with her in her purse. And I'm like, I have never seen anybody hoard tea bags and honey, but yeah.
I don't know. Then have an attendant who can tidy up the whole station for everybody. If it's a large thing, there's somebody doing the tidying, and they can keep an eye on my purse and I'm stealing your tea bags, but I'm not. But people steal everything. They steal the salt and pepper shakers. They do all sorts of stuff. And so you're worrying about the tea bag? Well, how about half the silverware that just went into that person's bag? Right. I know that sounds, I'm sorry, I'm a little passionate about it, but I don't necessarily think it's the tea drinker's problem to fix. I think that just like providing non-alcoholic beverage choices that aren't just Topo Chico and Coke, and because you want me to be able to participate within that happy hour and find this event to be inclusive and satisfying, I want you to want me to also find my morning part of this inclusive and satisfying.
Right. Yep. So,
and
100%.
And I think dealing with the same person in many cases, because if I'm not coming in having overindulged in alcohol the night before and I'm ready for my next session, I might more tending wanting to go towards tea, because again, the chemicals in that is going to really get me ready for that meeting, make me open, help me focus and concentrate, keep me calm and alert. And those are all the chemicals of tea. So it's perfect for the meeting. It's perfect for the session. And I'm just still speaking out to, in my choice not to have imbibed a bunch the night before. I'm fresh and ready. I don't need sort of the sludginess of coffee. I need the freshness of tea.
Right. Exactly. All right. And then the allergy aspect posted on Instagram, tea equals a safe alternative with those with dietary needs and a simple fix. Yeah.
Overall, it does. Yeah. When you have an herbal component, you do have some allergy concerns, or some people have concerns when you get into flavored teas, what might be there. But again, it's something that somebody can easily see what it is and choose to avoid. I can choose, if I have allergy concerns, to have an unflavored tea or an herbal blend that, lists what it is.
Okay. So being the number one drink, you said the number one drink.
It's the second to water.
Second to water. Okay. So
consumed internationally. Yes.
Consumed internationally. So in the United States, how, especially at a meeting or event, or even going into Starbucks, wherever, or into any kind of coffee shop, we're going to stay with the steeping room here and not Starbucks. And how do we educate our attendees is that a good question to ask? Are you a coffee or tea drinker on your event registration form? That might actually be a fun question to ask to see where you balance it out, on your registration.
I would say ask them, give them the choice of coffee, tea, or both, because there are actually a lot of people who are both, and it depends, and they vary the segment of the day. So I definitely have a lot of customers who do still want one cup of coffee in the morning. But what I found in catering events where I was providing coffee and tea was that if that event was starting at 9-10, they had caffeinate. Like if you need to caffeinate when you get up, you have caffeinated on your way there. And so it may be helping you. It might be perking you up on your break, but that beginning part where people are entering, you had to take care of that. If you're not coming down the elevator and hitting the floor, that's different. But if it's something that's starting later that you traveled to, then you took care of that component. So then tea also has a place, even if you are a coffee person, because it helps to moderate your caffeine. It has less caffeine in it. And it also has L-theanine in it, which helps to calm you and focus you, and helps with communication and comprehension.
Well, okay. I need to start drinking tea all the time because I need all of those things. Focus.
But you really have to pick teas that you like. That's the thing about when people would come in, if they were hardcore coffee drinkers, I wasn't going to start them on some light little green tea. I would suggest more robust blends that had teas from Assam and teas from Africa that were had a higher astringency that took, if they were milk drinkers, that took milk. Or I would pick something that was, if they weren't a milk drinker, I would still pick something. If they wanted something smoother but strong, I would still pick a stronger Chinese or Taiwanese tea that had a lot of body to it. All of these chemicals and oils and everything create a lot of structure and body on the palate. And it is true that a tea bag is going to have a harder time providing that for you. But there are better tea bags. But even a basic tea bag brewed well can still get a beverage that can be satisfying, and also a technology for your function.
Right. Well, and when we're talking about wellness, and so many people are so concerned, I gave a speech 2 weeks ago, and like 93% of people are wanting to know what's in their food, and how it's made. But then another 76% say the food and beverage that they select impacts their mental and emotional well-being. And I think tea, when we're looking at events and trying to create a more wellness focused event, tea is a great option to bring into that. And
Absolutely.
For all of the reasons, like you said, for focus and clarity, and, and if you need that caffeine, right? I'm not a caffeine drinker, but it's an alternative outside of water too, right?
It is. And it's more hydrating than coffee would be, sort of. But I would also say, when you're talking about bringing that wellness into the conference space, is how many of y'all have been starting to have yoga breaks or those types of things. They've become really popular. I keep going to trade shows and conferences where it's like, get there 2 hours early and do the yoga. And I usually don't, even though I'd like to, but I'm doing a lot of things for that conference. I would appreciate the cup of tea when I got there, though, still. Right. And I see it really in synergy to that. Like, you could be serving that, but I see it also as the same thing. Maybe you're not going to have a yoga break in the middle of the afternoon, but if you could bring in some teas, and maybe your hotel or convention center allowed you to either bring in, or was encouraged by professionals like me to be providing a better selection. I mean, also for the is that tea is going to last a lot longer than coffee in how it's stored. The length of time that you can keep your roasted coffee tasting great to serve, at multiple events is shorter than how long tea is. So when you have that investment, you could argue, oh, well, I'm going to have fewer people, but you can also argue you need less tea per cup. So the cost to the vendor, they're technically possibly making more. We'll see how that goes with upcoming costs, but also you can keep it on the shelf a lot longer, to use from event to event. So, I mean, if it's stored properly, there's a whole all things about that.
Right.
But
right. And I just wanted to tag over here on Instagram, Truly Terrific Tea posted, yes, I'm one coffee in the morning and then tea all day.
Hi, Truly Terrific Tea.
Do we know her?
We know her.
Good. Hello, Truly Terrific Tea. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that cost aspect is really interesting to me as well, because with whatever's going on, but the price of coffee has been going up, and how do you balance those? And we'll have a whole nother topic of that conversation on.
Right. I'm happy to be a guest when we get into that whole side of things, but I will short shrift really this introduction today if we really go down the commerce side of things. But I think that's going to be really important for us to all talk about.
In this event that I'm producing coming up, and I wish I had even thought about you because it's in Austin, but one of the exhibitors is bringing in a coffee vendor. But I'm like, okay. And I will pitch her next year, like, hey, let's, instead of doing coffee this year, why don't you try a tea thing? And I think that would be kind of fun. So how do we, if we're not in Austin and we can't bring Amy March in, to do a thing in our exhibit booth, how can we find experts like you across the country? Is it easy to find? What kind of program would a planner be looking for?
Well, there are a lot of tea professionals, and you can search them. I know a lot of tea professionals across this country, but there used to be a little bit more organization at the National Specialty Tea Association level. And I feel like there's been some fraying and disjointing really of that organization building in a way that could connect you in. But a good place to start, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's not the best answer, is to Google for sort of the top tea providers. So if you reached out to me and you said that you were having an event, I could connect you. I'm connected with a lot of professionals across the country, professionals that I've studied with, people who teach tea in many different ways, who are connected to many professionals, and so many small tea businesses who, from a restaurant standpoint or an education standpoint, are a web across this country. And so even if I were not that person, reaching out to local established tea businesses, they can put you in touch. I can put you in touch.
Right.
But that's true. I'm like, oh, I should really start a page on my website because I'm connected to professionals across the country and across the world, some of whom we provide tea to and others of whom we're just in association with each other.
I need to introduce you to Laura Silverman, who was on 2 weeks ago, who is the that's Jen, Zero Proof Collective, but she's the Zero Proof Nation, and she has created a Google map and
awesome.
on her website, and it's got like non-alcoholic bars, so cool. And so you guys can connect and do the same thing. Okay, so thinking through, I mean, because this is an international topic, and I want to come back to the cultural aspect of tea. I mean, teas, it's not just getting that, I don't know, I was going to say some brand, and I know I've got a bag of it, that ginger honey tea from the grocery store, right?
Right.
There's so much more to it. So how should we look at it and be respectful and meaningful incorporating tea into our programs without just saying, can I have the gallons of tea with the coffee?
Well, in terms of programming, you can definitely have professionals, and I'm not sure if that's what you're asking me from a program.
I think I actually wanted to know what some of the rituals of tea are, and then how can we incorporate it into it? Yeah.
I mean, they're just, I worry about cultural appropriation when we talk about this in that way, because it's not just really about ritual. Many different vessels. There are Yixing style pots, Gaiwan style pots and pouring cups. There are glass teapots. There are traditional Western teapots. There are all different types of vessels you can brew in. And if you drink tea, you'll even naturally just find yourself that some of them are more appropriate for different teas because they were designed in their style to bring out the best of that tea. Now, how can we appreciate that? Is that we can have small breakout sessions where we can interact. We can just have tea steeped for us. We can have a tea educator. We are often brought in by corporations to do a breakout within a meeting, to do a short tea tasting within as an option for a breakout session that's just like a bonus. So we do that. We also get included by different businesses who have us do tea tastings in a box accompanied by a video or a tasting sheet. So those are small ways. I just still will come back to that if you hired a tea professional to come in for your afternoon break session and they were making iced tea mocktail. And I don't really love the word mocktail, honestly, because to me, it makes it sound like it's this sugary event. And I want it. I think that we need a little different language for when we bring tea into that space to make it sound more serious and not so sweet. But as you understand, like we could have a fun break in the afternoon with really refreshing teas that are also not going to keep us all up all night. They could have things that weren't caffeinated, but also lighter caffeine that just gave something special. I feel special. I feel alert. I feel like that was delicious. I feel refreshed. I feel ready to do this tie up of this big meeting because you have given me a mental holiday in this small experience. Or maybe it's a more traditional tea pouring situation where either the vendor that comes in has already steeped the teas and they're just pouring them for you,
right?
Or they're giving you your choice of loose leaf teas or tea bags. And tea does take a minute, but when you There I am. Hi. When you brew coffee, that actually does take time too. So many people in the third wave coffee, they want to grind it and get it all right. And they're hand grinding and weighing the water. So people say that tea is so complicated and time consuming, but these plants, coffee and tea, ask of us to take a minute. And I've just paused there to take a minute. What happens when we take that minute, when we breathe in the oils and aromas and chemicals, not the processed chemicals, but the chemicals of that plant, of the tea, of the ginger, of the coffee? What happens when we actually take that minute and we connect with ourselves and we refresh our brain and we refresh our nervous system? How can then I better turn to this colleague that works across the country who I've never met in person and be able to connect and maybe end up talking about a project? But you gave me a minute to reconnect back to myself versus my performative self. And so that's where I think that tea just is inherent in the ritual, and that I can't give you a specific thing to do. I can tell you cool things like matcha is hot. Do you want to have a talk to you all about that, or mocktail situations, or tea cocktail? But I don't think in a large meeting situation that is not health oriented, that going for the like a particular style of steeping, like Gong Fu style steeping, is beyond something that's performative if it's on a larger scale. But if we're having recreational breakout sessions, then it's a great place to get someone in, like me, like Truly Terrific Tea, like Tea in Carolina, like so many different people who are being tea, all these different people who are tea professionals, to then help you come into an experience of it. But when it's a big,
No, I totally understand that. Okay. Wendy Porter said, my absolute favorite thing to do is afternoon tea. I've experienced that ritual at tea rooms all over the world and loves it. Yes. Thanks, Wendy. And I remember my mom and I doing it in Scotland a couple of years ago. We went for the Fringe Festival and we had so much fun doing that, participating in that. I love the fact, there was something that you said in there, the bringing it into the fold. Oh, I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say.
It's going to come back.
It is going to come back. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I want to talk about your cookbook, but you're working on a community tea, and I love how you spell it. Community, COMMUNITEA cookbook. Oh, and that reminds me of what I was going to ask you. It was because I had lunch at your restaurant, or breakfast a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And
I think
lunch. Okay.
With your
my friend David. Yep.
Yeah.
But, and I don't remember this, but I think you also asked me, because I'm like, I want some tea, but did you pair it with what food I was going to eat? And so my question was actually related to, you're pairing wines and you're pairing, and I know I've been to a champagne thing, you're pairing it with chocolates, but pairing teas with the food that you're serving.
Absolutely.
How does that work?
Well, because the polyphenols create different mouthfeels. And so some teas are much sweeter, some are more astringent, some, like today, I'm drinking something that just tastes like fresh, smooth spring. Some are very floral, some are spicy. So I work with restaurants, I work with food producers to taste through like a menu and make suggestions to what teas would be appropriate. I mean, it's hard, if you were asking me that wine question, I could just give you like, this goes with beef. It does take a minute with a tea professional, but it doesn't take long. And I think many chefs are getting more interested in using tea as an ingredient, which is a different route to go and a different way of steeping and brewing, but also pairing those flavors as an accompaniment or as a added final touch to a dish, using in a broth that's poured over a dish, or there's just so many different applications that can be used. But I think it's a longer conversation really to go through what the tasting notes are that we're for pairing, but it has a lot more flexibility than coffee. Honestly, I think for food pairing, more in the
Right.
range of wine.
I think that would be so much fun. And Jen, who was on LinkedIn earlier, she and Kate worked with a restaurant in Minneapolis with the non-alcoholic beverages, but the chef was the one that was on board the most. And I remember Kate saying that it was so fun to watch him see how people were tasting the food with the drink that was paired with that food. And a lot of that comes from the botanicals and things that you've been talking about. Yeah.
And that's very similar to tea, whether it's a flavored tea or unflavored tea. Like an unflavored tea still, as we've said, has so many possibilities what it tastes like. And so when I go in to a restaurant to set them up with a tea program, they may have tasted a bunch of teas in my space, but it's really important. I get an idea of what they're looking for, what they're looking to accompany their menu with, or just the clientele they're trying to attract with it. So we start there. But at the end, the most important thing is, what is the water in your venue, in your restaurant? If it's all coming out 205 and that's the only option, we have to pick a tea that's going to steep well at 205. Your water has a lot of minerality to it, or not. In my restaurant, people are like, why is your tea so great? And well, we adjusted the TDS like Starbucks next door. We always adjusted the TDS so that we could give you the best example of that tea. And so you have to then play with that. Now we don't have that same setup for our water. So we still make sure that every tea that we taste for purchase and for distribution is tasted with the exact same water, so that we're not playing that in. Now, when I drink tea, I drink it with all different types of water. And it's interesting to see how that intermingles. But I've had restaurants be really into a tasting and really into a tea. And then I go to them and I find out I'm pulling water off their espresso machine, and it's, it's barely filtered. And, we have to start again. I'm probably going to go to a blend, maybe then a single varietal. I have to see how it shows. We're going to taste through those teas, but we're going to find what works in the space. I mean, I could then get even more complicated. Like in Austin, our source of water changes depending on where you are in the city of Austin. And so I would have to change the TDS style on one of my locations based on season to have that extraction. So then if you're not even having that capability, what your water's tasting like through the year may be different. But that's happening to your coffee. That's happening to your coffee, and you're willing to serve that coffee.
Right.
So tell me that you're not willing to serve that tea. Maybe tea is a little more delicate. Maybe you're going to notice a few things, but a professional can help can mistake proof your situation. Maybe certain beautiful teas you can really only drink well at home, where you can control the setting, or in a tea house setting where they have controlled it for you. That there is a lot of tea that you can drink on the showroom floor, and there is a lot of tea that you can drink in a restaurant that's going to be satisfying and inclusive. And I think the word inclusive is incredibly important. Even if it's 10%, do you want to alienate 10%, 5%, 3%?
Right.
Do you want me to waste my time at your conference looking for water, and then having missed the start of everything to mill around the side, when you could have just served that? And maybe, part of the people would drink coffee, and part of those people who are drinking coffee right now would have been like, oh, that's so great. I don't really feel like a coffee. I don't, we again didn't get into, I don't feel like what the chemicals of coffee are going to do to me versus what the chemicals of tea are going to do to me in this moment. And they're different. And to think that your consumer isn't, if not academically aware of it, aren't physically aware of that, you're sort of short shrift to what's potential for humans.
Yeah.
So.
All right. That is so intriguing. And it also, and I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't like the flavor or the smell of it. So, but it makes me intrigued on like serving it based on the water type, because if the water in Florida is much different than the water in North Carolina, right?
Yes.
And so you might be buying
town to town.
Right. Exactly. And so you might be buying the same brand of coffee. Your hotel chain or whatever says, okay, everybody has to buy coffee A, and that's what they're serving so they can get that bulk discount. but that water is making that tea or that coffee taste different. It's going to make that tea taste different as well. And I don't know if planners have even probably thought of that.
Well,
right?
Here we go. So water in hotels, a lot of that water is softened. Like I can't drink the water in so many hotels because all I taste is the salt and the water softener. And if that hasn't been properly filtered back out, it is disgusting. I've had some horrible tea and coffee in shows in Las Vegas because of the softened water. And I'm just like, please, anybody, could you just put this through your water for these beverages, for coffee? Let's just do it for coffee. Right. I don't drink coffee, but are you making it with that salty water? Are you kidding me? So that's, for me, the biggest complaint to the larger corporate hotels and convention centers is disgusting salty water that you're serving any of us. But if you're coming out of a kitchen, if you're coming from a cafe setting where they may be taking that into account, then they may be filtering that water again. And no, it might not be exactly the same in many places. If it's Starbucks, it's exactly the same in many places. If it was me, it was going to be as close to possible because we're triple osmosis and they're, to get the TDS. But many restaurants, many cafes are taking into account some sort of filtration level for their drinking water. You just have to make sure that it's actually that water that's being pulled through their hot water tower or their coffee or espresso machines. What happened to it beforehand? And for an event, you don't have the time to do that. So that is a risk. So you have to pick blends and teas and companies that have the most forgiving tea. But if you then want somebody to have a special breakout for you, then we can take care of that. We're professionals. I haul water all sorts of places with me. There are water filter folks who come and filter your water for, tea conventions and coffee conventions. And that can be handled on a very large scale. The Specialty Coffee Association is about to handle the water of Houston at the end of month and have great coffee. Those people aren't going to be serving garbage on the floor.
Right. Because they want people to buy it. Yeah.
They want people to buy it. So it can be handled on a mass scale.
All right. So Wendy, okay. Wendy, if you're still on Instagram listening to this is another checklist that we need to add line item or checked item on our event planning, food and beverage thing is like, what do you do with your water for the tea and coffee that you're serving? Okay. One question. What is TDS?
The total dissolved solids. So the mineral content in your water. So, and when you do reverse osmosis on water, it removes most of those mineral solids. And then we would then put a certain amount of water back through a carbon block filter and then have a sensor and dial that so that we would get the ideal mineral balance for the way we're steeping teas. And so coffee places also do that. What I have a problem with actually is like, that is great. And I really wanted to show tea at its very, very, very best light. However, from an environmental standpoint, I can't for the long term get behind reverse osmosis, except in when there's chemical contamination or something that you're trying to manage through that, because you throw half the water away. But if I'm in Las Vegas, at least that half of the water that's being thrown away is going to go in irrigation, and they have actually made, but when we're someplace like Austin where we haven't started to recycle our water, then the fact that I'm throwing away half that water, even if I can afford it, because it's water's too cheap. I live in a place where it's an emergency. It's on verge of emergency. And so to throw half of it away is not a great idea. So there are other options for that, other lower key filtration that I will have more range of what my dissolved solids is, but it will balance what the flavor profile is. And then I can adjust my steeping temperature or time. And that's another thing of when you're interacting with the tea is just, you've got to steep it. If you steep it and you didn't like it, then you make a little adjustment, a little hotter, a little colder, a little longer, a little shorter. And if I can't control that temperature, I go into cafes, I go into restaurants. I'm like, this is what our setup is. How are we going to make that good? You have this jigger right next to that. You're going to put a jigger of just that room temperature water right in the bottom of that pot. You're going to pop in your tea leaves. You're going to pull on that and you're going to let it steep for 2 minutes, ready to go. Or you're going to take it to the table. It's going to take you 1 minute to get to the table. Tell them it will be ready to drink in a minute. Pull those leaves or leave them in. Depends on the pot you're using. And that's what I do. I go and I help restaurants and cafes of all sorts of styles figure out, how can I do this without making my staff crazy?
Right.
I made myself crazy. We all wanted to be crazy together. So we did it like we had different temperature water towers. We did all the things because we were a tea-based cafe serving, at any one time, 150 or more teas daily.
Holy moly. Yeah. Well, and then Wendy wrote, wow. She said, yes, we're adding it to our checklist and wow. And it just reminded me, there's a new cute little store here in New Bern that now serves tea, and the name of it is escaping me, but they bring the sand clock, with you and put it down and said, okay, your tea will be ready. And they have 3 different colors on it. And they're like, follow the one that's green, and that's when your tea is ready. And I love that. So
it's a great thing. I mean, we steeped it all. We had a million timers. We steeped everything to the end. We pulled the leaves. If it was a tea that could be re-steeped, we held onto your leaves for a long time. And then we eventually started just having to take the little leaves to the table because we couldn't keep track of your leaves. We had so many little, but just putting it on the consumer is also, it's a possibility. It does make a little more mess at the table, and for being a full service restaurant and sort of the scale at which we wanted you to experience a really delightful time, we handled all those steps so we could deliver that to you. That was who we were. But I really am in support. Those sand clocks are awesome, and pay attention to them. When they said, pull that little strainer or pour it all the way, do it. You'll enjoy it more. Do it.
I'm so glad we had this conversation. I mean, we haven't gotten this deep in conversation about tea when we've been together. So I'm so excited that I brought you here, because this is so interesting. And there's so many components to it, just like food, right?
Yeah,
and we adding
like
thing
food.
and and beverages are so important. And I love this. So thank you.
Thank you. I really love, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg, but tea's just amazing. It's just amazing.
Right. I'm going to do a new thing with you. I'm going to kick this off with you.
Okay.
Some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
I know you're not a coffee drinker. So first thing in the morning, you steep in the morning, black, green, or herbal?
Mostly green, and it varies a lot what green I'm steeping to the season. But in the winter, black. Milky.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your favorite tea and food pairing, sweet or savory?
Oh, I love it all. I guess sweet because it has such a great contrast, but because I know the range of the palette of tea, I can pair to savory so well. And it can really help cut the fat or the spice. And that it is drunk that way outside of the United States all the time. So you're asking me to choose between children.
All right. Your go-to vessel for drinking tea. Is it a teacup, a mug, or a travel tumbler?
Mostly a mug, just on the daily. And then I put the leftover in my travel tumbler because I love the calming feeling of having that tea while I hit horrendous traffic. But if I want to really appreciate, my morning or my day, then it's going to be a teacup, maybe a Western style or Asian style teacup that is just aesthetically more pleasing. And also just the thickness. Those cups are about how it treats the temperature. All of these vessels are about the temperature of the tea and the openness of it. So just like a wine glass, how you're going to be able to smell the aromas and the volatile and the oils. And so the vessel I pick often about my tea, just like I pick my teapot to the tea I'm steeping.
Wow. I'm so intrigued. This is so interesting. Okay. Your tea personality, bold and brisk, light and floral, or earthy and grounding?
Probably earthy and grounding, but still with a kick of fun.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
And then finally, if tea could talk at an event, what would it say to the organizers?
Oh, goodness. Use me, include me. Don't leave me out, and don't assume you understand me, have a talk and bring me in. Bring me in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Amy, this is so awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, this is how to follow Amy on Instagram at, there it is, the community tea_table and the steeping room. And anything else you want to share with Amy? There's their website too. Anything else you want to end on?
No, I'm just so appreciative that you brought me in to talk about this, because we really do have a true passion about providing well-sourced, ethical tea that is delicious to drink, and demystifying it. I'm the first to tell you, do you have a sauce pot at home and a strainer? Let's start there. You don't need anything fancy.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good to know. I do have a soft strainer, and I think I do.
A strainer and a sauce pot, just heat the water and be able to strain it through. We can start wherever you are to have coffee.
Okay.
To have tea,
All right. And Wendy just said, thank you so much, or so much fun. Thank you. And thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it, Wendy, and everyone else that's on over there. Amy, I don't think I'll see you when I'm here, but maybe if I can, I'll come by. We can catch up for a cup of tea while I'm in Austin.
Just message me. Yeah. Awesome.
I will. And Truly Terrific Tea just said, thank you both. So thank you for joining us.
All right.
All right. Everybody have a happy day, a great day. Until next, thank you for tuning in. And until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.